If it's Halloween, it must be Saw. Yo, what's up, everyone? Welcome back. Jamie here today reviewing Saw X, aka Saw 10. And straight up, before we get into the spoilers, I've got to say, obviously I'm a big fanboy of Saw. I'm going to admit that straight up. But even I can admit, even if you wasn't like, a big fan of the series, this film is so good. It gets back to the basics. It's basically John Kramer's movie. It makes you feel sorry for him and the people he's testing. And there's a few fan service bits in there as well, obviously. But before we get into the spoilers, I gotta say straight up, I feel like this is probably the best of the series. If not in top 3, no doubt about it. Just because of the whole dynamic, the way it plays with your, thoughts of how it's gonna go. And I was, straight up, I was so hyped for this movie. I was so excited before I went into it. I've been waiting since what? Well, technically, this is the first film inside the original timeline since Saw 3D, the final chapter, and that came out in 2010. So 13 years ago. We've had Jigsaw and Spiral since then, obviously, and, I have my thoughts about them. But overall, before we get into it, without the spoilers, this is clearly return to the form. Amazing. John Kramer's story. Saw is back. I hope we get a sequel after this. It's just so good. So let's just jump right into it with all the spoilers. Like I said, this is the first Saw inside the original timeline since Saw 3D, because Jigsaw and Spiral will take place after, those events. We knew it was going to take place between Saw 1 and Saw 2, and it was a perfect opportunity, really. And I hope with the next one it takes place either within the same time frame or between Saw 2 and Saw 3. Because, let's be honest, they shouldn't have killed John off in Saw 3 anyway, but I hope they don't go with another timeline like Halloween and all that. I hope they stay consistent with the continuity. And, with this formula here, what's the gap between Saw 2 and 3? There's a few months or a year at least, so they could have, squeezed 2 or 3 films into that. So it opens with John Kramer getting scanned for his cancer, and straight away you're like, wait a minute, every other Saw film opens with a trap, but this doesn't, and it's setting the tone straight away. This is John Kramer's movie. If you didn't care about John before, or if you loved him, you're going to love him even more after this. And obviously he's inside the hospital after getting scanned, and he sees one of the orderlies, one of the workers there, trying to steal from one of the patients, and inside his mind he imagines putting this guy inside a trap, which is the eye trap, which has been, there's barely any negatives about this film that I have, but they did market the hell out of this eye trap, and it wasn't even real, really. It was just inside John's head. He took inspiration from the guy in the bed with his fingers broken and all that. But it is a great trap. Obviously, you've probably seen it inside the trailers by now. The guy has to turn a dial, and each time he turns it, one of his fingers break. If he doesn't do it in time, both his eyes are going to be sucked out. And he only breaks, I think, 3 fingers until he runs out of time. And then the eyes get sucked out, which is so good. But the only thing about it, it wasn't actually real, like I said. It was just inside John's head. But at the same time, I did enjoy it because it shows John's process of taking inspiration from his surroundings and all that. So overall, it was a great trap, even though it wasn't real. It's not the first time he's done this either. I think in Saw 3D, yeah, Jill's hanging and Hoffman has that massive thing that's about to drive into her. That was also a dream. From that, I can't really think of other traps that didn't actually happen. But anyway, from there we go to the cancer meeting. John's there, and there's this other guy called Henry, and he's talking about how he's got stage 4 cancer. And then a few scenes after that, John's sitting down at a cafe outside, and Henry randomly comes, which at first you think, oh, it's just a random meeting. It tells him, to sit down and tell him more about how he's doing. And eventually Henry tells him about the Peterson projects, and he gives him the link. So the first time you're watching it, when I was first watching, I was like, wait a minute, this Henry shows off his scar as well. I was like, oh, they did this operation on me and the cancer's gone. But we'll get more into that later on, because clearly things are not what they seem here. But John gets the email for the Peterson projects, which he emails through Gmail. I love the attention to detail there as well on the computers. It's definitely Windows XP, it was the early Windows, let's just say that. Because this time frame must be 2002, 2003. But Cecilia, the blonde hair woman, she's managing it after her dad. And she smiles when he mentions Henry on the phone, which is another clear, just planting those little things in there to come back later on. So eventually John decides to go there because, he's running out of time. He's only got a few months left to live. Goes to Mexico, gets the taxi driver there with his name on it, and the guy's showing him around the town until eventually a van pulls up, which we've seen inside the trailer, with 2 masked men pulling out guns. And at first you're like, what, are they going to rob John's money? But no, they take him away from the taxi driver, put him inside the van, and take him to whereabouts Cecilia is, the actual projects, which was... I know she comments on it, oh, the FDA and all that, the drug administration, they're cracking down on us. But really, after you see the film, you're like, yeah, you're just doing that because of the police, aren't you? You're trying not to get caught. John's inside his mansion, and he meets Gabriella, who shows him, where to go and all that. And she's like, oh, this is my family. and you know, she helped me, you know, she saved my life and all this. But judging from the trailer, you know, all these people are just lying through the teeth anyway. He also meets young Carlos, who he helps fix his bike. And obviously the kid doesn't speak Spanish, so they communicate, and he's like, you know, what does pull mean? Which comes back into play later on, which is pretty smart. So after the operation, well, during the operation actually, they have the like monitor to show like, you know, they're cutting into his brain, but they notice that John's staring at it, so they turn it away. And you're like, wait a minute, why are you turning it away? And then he eventually loses consciousness, and he comes back to after it's done. And Cecilia's there, and she's like, oh, the rest of your life's gonna happen now. She's showing him like the blood results, saying it's all great, but we know from the trailer this is all bullshit. They didn't actually do anything to him. After the operation, John buys a tequila bottle to give to Gabriella as a thank you. He goes back to the place he was taken to, and it's all cleared out. There's no one there. And eventually, you know, he takes the bandage off his head, gets the mirror, and he sees there's no scar, and they never cut into him in the first place. It was all bullshit. So of course, you know, he freaks out after that and screams. So John eventually kidnaps the taxi driver, and it's revealed he was part of the operation pretending to be, you know, a surgeon or whatever. I didn't catch that until he actually revealed it. So he puts him inside a trap where he has bombs on both his hands with knives, and he has to cut through his tissue to get him out. But obviously he's on a time limit. And the funny thing is, he actually survives this. He actually gets him out in time and knocks him off. And then John tries giving him medical attention, which, I mean, going into this film, you know, being a prequel, I thought no one was going to survive. But actually, at least 2 people survived, which was kind of surprising. And this trap was decent. You know, John's there watching him throughout the glass. And he's like, Kramer, I already told you everything you want to know. Which we find out later on, this guy grassed up everyone in part of the con artist. You know, he told them all the names and everything, including Cecilia's boyfriend Parker, which we'll get to in a bit. Which I forgot to mention, before John gets the operation, he meets Parker. He says he's got cancer inside his throat and he's just been cut open, but all that was lies, which we'll find out later on. Amanda kidnaps the rest, and they all get put into the warehouse. Valentina's the first one. I think she's a prostitute or something, because she meets someone outside and she's like, oh, you know, money before sex, and the guy's like, I'm not paying. But Amanda eventually, you know, saves her from that. I guess you want to say she knocks the guy out and then kidnaps her. But she's the first one with Tess. She's got like a jilly, I've got the name of it now, but it's like a rope thing she's got to cut through her leg with before this rope goes through her neck. And this first, well, it's not the first trap, it's one of them, I guess, but it's so gnarly to look at. She's got to get the bone marrow from her leg into the machine within 3 minutes. So Cecilia's there, like, encouraging her. She's like, you know, come on, do it, you gotta do it and all this. So she starts cutting through. She cuts her whole leg off, a clean cut, puts the thing in to get the bone marrow out, but unfortunately she runs out of time within a few seconds, and her head gets cut off as well, which is just crazy, man. Obviously we've seen this before inside the series, but the effects and everything was so good here. So from there, the next trap is Mateo. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And I gotta be honest, this guy was one of my favorites. I mean, obviously he's a piece of shit for being a part of the con, but he's a vet. Like, he works on animals, so he has no idea what any of this stuff is. And, you know, Billy comes out wheeling the whole thing and his tape, and he's going through, like, you know, what's this thing? And Cecilia tells him what it is. It's like, I don't give a fuck what it's called. But the guy has to get a drill through his skull, pull out some of his brain matter so it dissolves, and gives him the key within 3 minutes, which is crazy. So he drills through his skull and eventually puts some of his brain matter in there, but it runs out of time, and the mask folds in like an Aztec Mexican. It looks so great, and I don't know what happens after that. Obviously he dies, but I'm assuming it burns his face, but the way it just closed in, it was so great. So Parker, who we mentioned before, the guy who's pretending to have, you know, the operation, he comes to the location looking for his money with a gun. And Amanda eventually, you know, she puts the Valentina's head on the pig mask and stands it up, and the guy shoots thinking it's someone there, and Amanda comes from behind and just knocks him out. So he gets tied up in the location where John and Amanda are looking on, and John's like, you know, I understand you're here for your money, but you're going to play a game as well, but no guns are involved. So at first you're like, well, what's this guy's game going to be? Because obviously he's claiming he wants to, you know, go to Cecilia and get his money back, but we don't know what his game is just yet, but we do find out. The next person's trap is Gabriella, and she's pulled up by her ankle and her wrist, and this radiation machine comes out, and basically she has to break her hand and her leg to get out of the trap. and Cecilia's encouraging her to do it as well. And she's like, oh yeah, do the leg first so you can swing out the way. She does that, and then the radiation machine moves as well, so she has to do both. But she ends up surviving, and she drops on the floor with the burnt marks. And John was on the tape. He's like, you know, you can get skin grafts, the bones will heal, you can survive this. And she does. Pretty cool twist. But then Parker, he gets untied and he goes for the gun, and he's got Amanda and John at gunpoint, and he leads them down, and it's revealed that he's Cecilia's boyfriend, and he kisses her. You know, at this point, Cecilia just becomes crazy. Gabriella is supposed to be taken to the hospital. John's like, she passed the test, let's take her to the hospital, and they don't want to. And Cecilia basically just kills her. She stands on her neck and breaks it, and this bitch is evil, man. Evil. So evil. But great actor as well, or great character, but evil down to the bone. And this upsets Amanda, because Amanda had some sort of connection with her, because they're both like, you know, abusing drugs and everything like that. But even John before was like, you know, she has a free will as well. She did choose this life. She wasn't forced into it. But Amanda has that connection there, and she's upset when she gets killed, which, you know, fair enough. And this is the great twist. John gets forced into a trap, because at this point, there's one trap left, and it's bloodboarding. And, you know, you think, oh, they're going to force John and Amanda onto it. But all of a sudden, they hear kicking from outside, and it's Carlos, the kid from before that John helped with his bike. And Cecilia, being the evil bitch that she is, she brings him in, and him and John are going to be inside the trap. So instead of being waterboarded like the torture device, it's just blood coming down, and they have levers. And, you know, if you pull one, then the other person, you know, gets the blood. And John obviously doesn't want the kid involved, because he has morals as well. And he's like, no, well, why are we using the kid? But they force the kid onto it as well, and John's just taking all the blood, because obviously they don't want the kid to die. But the kid actually pulls the lever, and he's like, you know, he wants to help John, which is pretty cool as well. So from there, Parker and Cecilia go up to the room where John was watching, where the money is. And the door locks once they grab the money, and there's no bullets inside the gun either. And Hello Zep starts playing, which is pretty cool. I love this moment. And the gas starts coming into the room, and the only way to survive, one of them has to die while the other one can go through the hole and, you know, breathe. And eventually she kills Parker and puts her head through it. So it seems like she survives, which is kind of crazy. The most evil person of the film survives. But I'm sure this is setting up for a sequel. I think they've already said, the producers, if they come back and make another one, they want to bring Hoffman back and her. And the way this film ends, it's so, like, unlike any other film. We don't get game over or I speak for the dead or anything like that. It's just John, Amanda, and Carlos walking out with the money. $8 million, by the way, which he gives to the kid. Which I'm sure he don't give the whole money to. I'm sure John takes some for himself, because that would explain, like in Saw 4, he's like, don't talk to me about money, I've got money. And, you know, it would help fund his whole work and everything like that. But it just ends with them three walking away with Saw X coming up. And I do like the ending, because it's something different. The same with the opening, it wasn't a trap. But I'm glad they included the post-credit sequence, which we'll get to in a minute, which was so fan service, but it was so great. The lights come on, we're inside the bathroom once again. We've seen the shots inside the trailer, and Henry's hanging. John's in there with fucking Hoffman. We hear Hoffman's voice earlier inside the film when John calls him up. He's like, I need help, you know, locating these people. But we actually see Hoffman, and oh my god, Hoffman's one of my favorite characters. I was cheering inside the cinema, I loved it. But Henry's inside this trap where it's going to cut into his stomach, because he lied about the scar, and obviously he was part of the con the whole time. You know, he gave John the information to get involved in it and everything like that. We don't understand the rules of this trap. It's just assumed that he just dies there. But that isn't John's MO. He gives people a chance. So maybe inside a sequel we'll find out what the rules are. But the way they left it, it seems like it's an execution. And also, this film takes place between Saw 1 and Saw 2. So, say Henry does die in there, did he take his body down and remove it out? Because he's not in there in the later sequels, he's not in there in Saw 3D, for example. So, it does leave some questions, but at the same time, I feel like it answers something as well, because at the end of Saw 3D, Hoffman's locked inside the bathroom by Gordon. We know Hoffman knows the location of the bathroom, not just from this, from Saw 5 as well, because he renovates the house, doesn't he? So it's easy just to write that Hoffman puts something inside the bathroom as a fail-safe, just in case he gets locked in there. Because how many people have been testing inside the bathroom now? It's been quite a lot. And Hoffman's clearly got the, you know, the instinct to survive, so anything could have been put in there. But yeah, overall, this film, if I had to rate it, to be honest, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Obviously, it's not a perfect film, but I could barely find anything wrong with it. First time watching it, obviously, maybe I'll, you know, get more nitpicks as I watch it more. But right now, Saw 10, 9 out of 10 for me. I feel like it's definitely the top 3 of the series, if not the best, because it's so personal with John. And you know, the characters, obviously, the pieces of shit, but you learn more about them. In other Saw films, they just get kidnapped, don't they? And you hear a tape and everything like that. But this is more personal. You get to know him more and everything like that. Like I said, Mateo, even though he was involved inside the scam, he's just a vet. I did feel kind of sorry for him. Same with Gabriella as well. And they both got really bad deaths, to be honest. But from here, I hope we get another inter-sequel between Saw 2 and Saw 3, because there's a big gap there. Have all 3 of them on the screen at once. Have Hoffman, Amanda, and John with a personal game. Maybe Gabrielle, maybe Cecilia's involved as well, because she's still technically alive after this, even though I'm guessing she's left there to die, like starve or whatever. But there's so many possibilities that can go with this. I hope we get another sequel. I hope Saw comes back. It's my favourite franchise, no doubt about it. I love the continuity. And there's so much stuff they can do from here. If this film makes a lot of money, I'd say just keep doing it while Tobin Bell's available to play John, because this just proves, like, Saw 10, the 10th inside the series, and it's probably the best one. That just proves everything to me, man. But let me know your thoughts and opinions down below. There's so much stuff we could talk about here, and I'm probably going to make more videos as that the future. Like and subscribe if you're new. Saw 10, amazing. Let me know your thoughts down below. Until next time, peace out, and